Live.
All right, so welcome everybody. We are now on to our 11th production review, and this time we're going to be talking about the actual first opening shot of the planet and kind of go into world building a little bit on Tycho Decay and kind of the process of that. So, Alec, you said that you were coming in with the actual shot itself, correct?
Yep, that's the plan. I'm gonna share my
Awesome.
screen here, and we'll get to it. So I've decided what I want to do with these. We're not the best at communicating, and I take full responsibility for that. Because it's like we're communicating in a void, right? There's like no context for a lot of this stuff. But I'm gonna give a little
Wait,
bit of
is this you
context.
and me, or just people in general that who's bad at communicating?
Uh, all the above, but mostly me and sometimes you. But so what I wanted to do first is go through like some of the storyboards and kind of show like the concept and the evolution, right? So
Okay.
we've never really done like a full overarching story, and I kind of like it that way because I like people being able to piece it together. But it means there's no like context for like any of the things we talk about. But starting with the storyboard, so um, there's the general idea was originally this whole Dead Space thing, but there needs to be a planet, and on that planet there's like a planet cracker, right? Which means they're taking a piece of the land and they're trying to mine it for all of its materials, and they're just gonna pull the whole thing up to get at it from all sides, rather than like going into the earth and mining down. It's like pull it out and mine it in the air. Um, Originally it was just like here's a shot with like a spaceship going towards it, um, and then let's see, and that developed. We realized we wanted the planet cracker, and I just lost that.
So originally the idea was to have like a ship flying towards the planet itself.
Yeah, so like
Okay.
we've played around with a bunch of different ideas. I'm a big fan of establishing shots. It's something I think movies have sort of lost. Um, and if I go to um, pre-production, behind the scenes, early development, like really early on, the thought was if it plays. I don't know why this isn't playing. Let's try this one. All right, so this is super duper early on. This isn't even what I want, but really early on, the idea, I think we have it right there, maybe for a second. Yeah, I was gonna kind of pan up from, um, this is like super, super early development, and I left a review for Alan to look at, but I don't have it. Anyway,
Okay.
this is great TV. I don't know why this one's not playing. I believe this is it, but okay. Well, anyways, there's gonna be an early shot of it. That's Anne's rig. We're just gonna like pan up from some really generic like stuff to look up, and you'd see the planet. So we were like on top of the spaceship, you were literally look up, and then it was like that wasn't working. So then we kind of had this idea, and this is more of like an Ishimura type design, which is the spaceship from Dead Space. So it's like, well, that's flying to the planet or whatever, and the planet's where all the problems are. And then it was like, well, let's just have it be cracked to begin with, and that makes more sense to me. So that's when we eventually got to the current shot, the current version we have here. And this is like not at all in the right spot, but you kind of get the idea. And then I did an early version of this, which I think this might be the earliest. And I kind of liked it, but it's really busy, is sort of the problem. And I have a tendency, I'm colorblind, so I have a tendency of like really oversaturating and like I crank the contrast super high.
You're
Um,
colorblind?
yeah, yeah, yeah. Uh,
Oh.
Red, green, blue, black. The Detronopia, I think is how you say it.
Oh, okay. Okay.
But not like black and white. Not like someone's like, "Are you a dog?" And I had this like lens flare coming off the planet as like the sun kind of set, and the problem was like your eye wants to go here when really I want your eye to go here, right?
Yeah.
And there's also you can see the cracked planet down here a little bit, but it's really hard to make out. And I decided to go with a more abstract kind of circular planet cracker rather than like an Ishimura type deal. So then I played with cleaning that up a couple different ways. I think this might be more or less the same. Yeah. And then from there, I think this is more or less the most recent. Yeah. We get to this version. So this is sort of me learning my lesson. Let's tone it down. Let's make it more simple. I have a little sticky note that says less is more on my desk right now. And there's more stars. It's less crunched to black. Um, and This guy's more subtle on the right. You can look at it if you want, add some contrast and scale, but it doesn't really take away your attention. We punch in a little closer here, and then this thing really pops now against the almost all blue sort of background. And there's a little fire on the island, which plays into the rest of the scenes that we see. And what's cool about it is that's now gets your attention. So now if I like close my eyes, there's a good test you can do as an artist. It's like close your eyes, open them, see what you notice right away, and then see kind of where your eye wanders. And so for me, it's like now it's like this thing, and then it goes down to the fire, which is what I want. And then you kind of get to the edge of the planet. It's, it all kind of pushes in this way. And then you're kind of forced out, right? Given the angle of these two things with each other. And you kind of notice the moon at the end, which isn't really important. So I kind of like the whole structure now. I think the planet looks a bit better. It looks a lot more realistic. It's less like just crazy saturated as I tend to do.
The moon's important to me, you jerk.
Okay. Yeah, and so it's like I think it's pretty much this might be our first like quote unquote completed shot. I'll probably tweak everything. Like everything will probably get one more pass of like color grading, maybe one more render so there's some like less noise. It's probably not coming through the stream super well, but there's a bit of noise like in this kind of shadowy area here. And then on the edge of the planet there's some noise. But I'm also not against noise. I'll probably add like what's funny about noise in 3D is like you do everything you can to get your like render as noise free as possible, and then you inevitably add like some film grain on top to make it look like good, like quote unquote good. It's a weird phenomena that we've talked about a little bit before. So that's where we're at with the planet shot. I think I want to do these more like this, where it's like a quick, fast update, unless we have a lot to talk about.
Okay.
Where I kind of show the before, here's where we started, and then here's kind of where it ends up. So I'm really liking that. And then the other thing I have to update you guys on is Rob had an idea about the logo animation, and I wasn't super happy with it when I had finished it. I said that last time, and then he had mentioned like, well, let's actually have it break apart. Like if it's like decaying, right? Why not have it like actually do that? It's a bit literal. I will say I've seen it done before, but it's better than what I had. So I'm like, hey, every step in the right direction. So today was mostly spent trying to get this guy looking the way I wanted to. And you can see it slowly like falls apart. So it's a little jumpy right now, and it's just like I don't have enough levels in my in my settings essentially.
Well, it's interesting too. So it's slightly different than what I had in my thoughts
Uh-huh.
of doing it, which is not saying that it's bad.
Mm-hmm.
It actually looks really good, but and probably makes a little bit more sense with this way. My thought was that you would have the letters just starting to float apart.
Oh yeah.
As they kind of separate out and so they get a little bit they start floating apart in different directions, like the E moving up, the D moving, to the diagonal down and to the left, and then you have those effectively start to blur out as if they're being stretched apart.
Oh, interesting.
But yeah,
this is how I interpreted what you said when you're like, oh, they should actually break apart. I was like, that's a good idea. And so
no, that's the thing. This still works, which is
like a
what's
texture
interesting.
map and stuff.
Yeah, no, that's the interesting thing though, is that like, yeah, you can do different ways with it, and you're right. You're like, oh, it's a little literal. It's like, yes, but sometimes that's not actually a bad thing. No. Because I used to be the same way, which is like I used to hate when something was like directly literal. Like I am not the biggest fan of when you say the movie title in the movie.
Right.
I'm sure we talked about that before, but it always stood out to me that you're trying to reinforce things. Like that's the whole point of like visual storytelling in a movie, is that you want the visuals to reinforce the story that you're telling. Because if you do the opposite, unless you're very particular about it, and like that's the whole point, it just gets jumbled and people are like, okay. It doesn't necessarily mean that they don't understand the story. It just doesn't resonate with them nearly as much.
Right. I think I'm going to make it a little more subtle. Like I like the A, like about the amount of destruction on the A, and I think this is a bit too much. Yeah. So I think less is more again. Like I'm going to probably settle this up a little bit. But this is kind of where I got to by the end of the day here, and I was like, you know what? We'll just render that out and show that for the thing. But I like it. Yeah, I think it's good too. I still like the Y kind of having the most, but I like the A for pretty much everything else. Is about correct level. I mean,
you could do it in a like progressively linear, where it's like it's less and less from the D all the way to the Y.
But... Yeah, it does that from top to bottom right now. And I could do it also like right to left or left to right or however else we want to do it. But there's a few things I like I kind of,
Well, so
yeah.
what I mean though is that the D doesn't have nearly as much
Right, exactly. Yeah. Right. So right now,
yeah, breaking apart.
if
Okay,
you
yeah.
notice, the bottom is less than the top,
Yeah,
right?
yeah,
So we could
exactly.
do
Yeah.
that same ramp essentially, but from
Oh, okay,
right to
okay.
left. Yeah. Um. So yeah, that's I think where we're at, and I think it's gonna work really well. Like the end sound effect is like this, like, and I think it'll work
Okay.
well with what we have kind of
Cool.
going on. Yeah, but less is more, guys. Less is more. But I will say what's more important, and this kind of goes to world building, which is what I want to talk about. It's supposed to be like a pun, right? Like we're talking about the planet shot, but it's also world building.
Is that a pun? I don't think that's a pun.
It's a pun.
Like
It's a
that's
play
just
on words, at least.
yeah, it's definitely a play on words, but I
Yeah.
don't. Yeah. It's okay. That's
Um,
okay. I'm not the punniest person,
yeah.
so
But the it's better that something's done well than its original. I have right here. I'm not gonna turn my camera around, but over my camera, I have my 4 C's. And I think I may have said this before, but I'm gonna say it over and over again, which is clear, clean, creative, copyright. And that's
mhm.
the order it should be in. So the very first thing is like, is it clear? Like, is what you're trying to get across? Is your message? Is your idea clear? And then is it clean? Is it professional? Is what that means. Is it well done? And the third is creative. And I think with the problem with most creatives, they like to start with like, is it creative? Is it copyrightable? Meaning, is it completely original? And then is it like, then can I clean it up and then make it like I'll assign a meaning to it at the end, right? And like that's the wrong way to do art, in my opinion, and just anything creative. Like I think the correct order is like first be clear, then be clean. If it's clear and clean, that's all 99% of like all work needs to be. That's like
Yeah.
most logo design. It's like, as long as it's clear and clean, the like originality and the creativity doesn't really matter. It's like, oh, can I see that that is um clearly associated with that brand? It's, and then is it does it look good? Like, is it not pixelated? Is it not broken? Is it not, are
Yeah.
the colors good, right? um so yeah, clear, clean, creative, copyright. And I think that's an important thing to remember when doing anything is like, look, having a completely like crazy original idea, a copyrightable thing that's like yours, right, is pretty hard to do. It doesn't happen like intentionally as often as we think. And so
Original ideas are far less common than we
right.
think they are.
And like, and I think it's overrated too. I think is if someone like becomes really, when you like are inundated with something, you want like
Mhm.
original ideas, but there's nowhere else where that really applies. Like if you're on a football team, it's like, do you want the play ran well, or do you want the play to be, are you gonna put originality of the play at the top? It's like, no, if it's just a simple like, you know, whatever that like hook thing is, right, where you go down and then to the left. If it's just one of those, like the classic, like throw the ball, get to the guy. That's fine, as long as he gets the touchdown, right? And that's the same with like food. It's like originality only really becomes a thing once you're getting to like the weird top end of stuff, and people are like, "Oh, I really want to try it." It's like you're a foodie, you've had so many stuff. So then originality becomes your differentiator when everything's at a quality level that's so high, right? So like when everything's quality is so high, then you start needing copyright as your differentiator. But you don't need that until you get pretty far. So like this is like our first short film. This is like a huge learning journey. And my goal is like, can I make it look good? Can it be like clean? Can it be professional? Is this going to be something that people are going to like look at and be like, "Oh, I could see that being, I could pay that guy to do that," right? I'd be interested in more of this.
Yeah.
And then from there, it's like eventually we'll get to a point where we're doing stuff that's like, hopefully really unique and special and cool. But I think also that just comes out of like doing something good for so long that you start having more ability to focus on like, the final 10% or 5%, right?
Yeah, yeah. You don't have to worry about it's the same thing as once you have taken some of the steps and you've internalized them so that it's just kind of like
Right. It's routine
yeah, I get routine
or
is one
muscle
way of
memory.
putting it. Yeah, muscle memory is probably a better way. Then it frees your mind to go to, okay, now I can think of other things,
Right.
or I can focus on other things. I don't have to put as much energy and effort towards focusing on this one thing because I know how to do it.
Right.
So yeah, I get what you mean on that. Yeah.
Yeah. But I think it's gonna be cool. I think if I touch it up a little bit, I think it'll be really a fun, uh, like professional looking thing that I think people are gonna enjoy.
Yeah.
So I want to talk a little bit, and we can try to keep this short too,
Okay.
about
Try.
world,
I love that word try.
yeah, about world building and like what is it, what do you consider good world building? Because it's something that like
Mm,
sometimes gets a bad rep. I think sometimes it gets um, thrown around like and it as like things get excused as world building or like, and then some people don't do enough of it, and then it's like you don't feel like you really understand what's going on. So I'm just, what is like a, what do you consider good world building, and then where is a good example? Because I have some examples in my head that I can think of.
okay. Good world building. Yeah, that it's interesting because it is uh you could take it because the first thing you think of is going to be like a fantasy world or something. So you could say
Mm-hmm.
like Lord of the Rings. That's great world building. Why? Because it's so detailed and goes in all these avenues. But it's like, but there's other world building that doesn't have that.
Mm-hmm.
Um, that like you could argue like in the same vein, you could argue Harry Potter is great world building.
Mm-hmm.
It was fantastic world building. Um, and then it started to struggle later on with that because I don't think it. I think it started you basically you were starting to tell stories that you weren't prepared to tell.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but then you can also go to just like not modern movies, but more of a okay, here's a good example. Roman Holiday.
Okay.
Good world building. It's a film, old film. I think it's probably one of the best romantic comedies ever. The reason why I think it's good world building is that it's a little bit simple. They do things in they're in Rome. They do things in Rome, so they're using historical sites and so
Mm-hmm.
forth. They're working within that world that you can like, oh, okay, this is realistic. You know, it's a fantasy at
Mm-hmm.
some respect, but it's interesting and it's grounded in that where you can suspend your disbelief a little bit easier.
Mm-hmm.
Like I think good world building is when you are allowing you are helping your audience suspend their disbelief rather than making it difficult for them to do it.
Yeah.
So
I think that's a
that
really good definition. And I think when it comes to like suspending disbelief, I think for me it's anything that makes the world feel bigger than it is on the page or on the screen or like in the
yeah.
game. So like
Mhm.
there's I've noticed some with video games. I notice this a lot with God of War, where the world building can be really good at times as far as like some of the mythology and other stuff, but then the world also though feels really small. It, like Asgard feels like really tiny, especially in the first game, because you don't see any other like human beings just like walking around minding their own business. And um, it's one of those things that like I think that uh, really helps films is if there's like a small bit of story or a character. Like I think I agree with you. I think Harry Potter is one of the best at it because there's all these just little elements that you would say like, well, that doesn't add to the story and that doesn't add to the characters. So like, why should I care about this? And Star Wars is fantastic about this, right? They fly into the town on the in the episode 4, A New Hope, right, on the little like speeder with the droids in the back and Obi-Wan in the passenger seat, and there's like stuff going on. There's like things scurry away, and you're like, oh, evidently there's little rat-like things that run on 2 legs in this world, and then there's like some guy's fixing something, and he's like, hey, whatever, right? And like you go to the cantina, and it's just like all these races and all of these aliens and all of these like, and there's droids serving drinks and doing stuff, and like there's a little fight going on and somebody loses a game of cards, and like so like all that stuff to me, well, it doesn't necessarily help the story, it's not really informing our characters. That's all wonderful world building because it makes me go like, it tricks you into thinking like, oh, there's actually a lot more here than I get to see, right? And any of those could
Yeah.
play out however they want. One of the things I think is really poor world building is the beginning of Altered Carbon, which is a sci-fi series. I think it's a really good. Like the first season's really good. I never watched the second season because I heard it wasn't as good. But I like the first season. But he gets woken up. He's been in like cryo sleep for years or whatever, and it's this like common thing where you can like they re-sleeve you is what it's called. So you, like your consciousness is stored and then it gets put into like a new body. Um, and one of the things they do is this the consciousness of like I think it's this like little kid, or it could be vice versa. But I think it's a little kid, and it's like put into this like old man's body, and they're like, "Well, that's the body we had." And they're like, "But she's 9," and they're like, "Well, now she's 52." But they just like say it, right? And I was like, that moment would have been so much more powerful if you just had this family being like, Jenny, and hitting the old man being like, hi, mom, hi, dad. And like, cause they already explained it to you how it works. They've already said, like, look, you just get the body you get, you get re-sleeved. It's how you, it's a death insurance essentially. And if you don't have like a pre-made body for you, you just get a criminal's body. That's how it works. And so this little girl gets put into this like old criminal's body, and it's like, well, now she has to live with that. But that would have been much more interesting if you just, or a better world building if we just got to see that, the interaction between the parents, and then it lets your brain like think about it, and then that world becomes bigger versus like, I don't know, right away I saw it as like, oh, you're trying to world build, but you're just literally telling me like, see, look, in this world sometimes things you don't want happens, and little girls ends up in an old man's conscious, or their consciousness ends up in an old man's body, and isn't that weird? And I'm like,
Yeah.
ugh, it would have been better if you just let that
Well,
play
it's
out.
funny because it's a good example of good world building is where the things in the story make the world seem bigger, because that's exactly how, like, John Wick I think is a perfect example of that. They literally, there's only one thing in that story that makes the world feel a bit bigger, and that's the hotel,
Right.
which is what all the other movies are around, because they literally don't have anywhere else to go for a sequel. It's like,
Yeah.
well,
Yeah.
he
Yeah.
killed everybody, so like, what is he gonna get a cat? Someone does it again? Like, that doesn't make any sense. So like, what are we gonna do? Oh, the hotel. And you're like,
Right.
all right, which is also why I feel like the rest of the movies, you're like, oh, okay, like I get it, they're fun, but
Right.
you're just like, this is kind of goofy
Yeah, I mean,
to an
it's
extent.
clearly, I think, a movie that didn't expect to make more than one movie. And so you kind of get that situation now and then where you haven't set up, like, you haven't really even thought about the world beyond, like, this film.
Yeah,
And so there isn't, like, necessarily a bigger world. And, it's always interesting um, to see, like, where people go off when it comes to that, which is, we talked about Furiosa a little bit last time, and it
yeah,
didn't make any sense to me given what they had established in their world building, which is like, hey, they're now in control. Like she doesn't really have a history with anybody, you know,
yeah.
and like, and Max would still be alive and around. So like, it was, I don't know, it's really interesting to do a prequel, right? When you're like, all of your world building has been like, I think Mad Max, I could be wrong, but I think it's only been like sequels, sequential, right?
Yeah. Oh yeah.
And
Yeah. It's
um and so it seems really interesting to me to like take it and then go like backwards, from there. There's some things I think you could do that with. I'm kind of, maybe they have and I just missed it. I'm kind of surprised they haven't made another like Water World. um 'cause it's like a
the Kevin
cult.
Costner
Yeah,
one.
yeah, yeah, it's like a cult classic.
You're not
um
why? Hold on.
yeah.
You're surprised they haven't made another one.
Yeah,
Do you know how much that movie lost?
it doesn't matter. That's why I'm surprised they haven't made another one.
No. That's the thing. It's like, listen, if you're gonna bomb that bad, like its budget was around 175 million.
Whew.
Its box office was 264 million. That's a
And
bomb.
that doesn't matter, right? Like, it doesn't matter that
That
it bombed.
absolutely matters.
Oh, I don't think so. I don't, because I mean, I guess if you're the producers or somebody, like, you are like, oh, it's because of this movie's curse, but it's not the movie's problem, right? There's been plenty of it, the reason it bombed is meant multiple reasons, right? Like, but the fact is, it's kind of known as this like cult classic film that people love, and that, like, I think
Yeah,
you
you hang
could
out with different
do
people than I do.
I think you could do it right. You know what I mean? And it's an IP that's like probably cheap, right? That people like understand. I don't know that, and like with the success of Mad Max and with the success of like, and our like current focus on like the climate crisis and stuff like that, right? Like, with that current focus, with the um like success of post-apocalyptic like filmmaking right now, I feel like Waterworld is at a prime spot to be made into a thing.
I feel like the climate movies that have come out recently have not done well, and there's a reason for that.
They
But
might not have done well, but if you weren't I think you could make a good water world. I don't think it'd be that impossible.
I don't. I have. I did not realize people consider that a cult classic.
Oh
I would
yeah.
also like to point out that cults are usually very small, and that's the point. They might consider it a classic, but nobody else who pays does.
I think if you
I would
released a
not. I'm sorry.
modern
I just
water
wouldn't.
world and you pulled it off, I think you could make a good. I think you could do it well.
Dude, I've seen Waterworld. I never needed to. I was never thinking like, you know what? I wish I could see a better version of that. Like, no.
See a
I
better version of it. I want to see a whole new, like, I don't want any of the characters to be the same necessarily. I just want something set in the world. It's a cool world, right?
uh, where
It's a
there's
cool
just a bunch of.
concept.
Do you want like an ocean planet, something set in an ocean planet? Because I could get behind that.
No,
I
I would
can't get
do it.
behind
You would do it
Waterworld
like
planet.
it'd be Mad Max, but it's with boats,
I
right?
I
You have like
this
water barons, right? That's the whole point. The whole point is like it's this post-apocalyptic, except for it's instead of in the desert or instead of in a city, it's set on the high seas, right? So it's
okay.
like this.
Okay,
It's like this
hear me
steam,
out.
not steampunk, but like what do you call it? Gas punk. It's gas
Hear
punk, right? But it's gas
hear
punk
me
on the
out.
high seas.
Hear me out. You have a group of people, and they're stuck on a vehicle, and they gotta maintain same speed,
That's just called
or
speed.
else it blows up.
That's just Keanu Reeves
But
speed.
now, wait. But put it on a boat.
I mean,
Yeah?
that just sounds like speed on a boat.
No, that's called Speed 2 and it flopped.
Oh,
That's
was
my
it?
point. This is yes, we had Speed
But
2,
so
it was on a
you're
boat.
being a producer
Sandra
right
Bullock was
now,
in it and it flopped.
and you're blaming the ocean for the flop. That doesn't make any.
No,
The
I'm just
problem was
saying.
the problem
I'm
was
saying
the problem
taking
was you
X
made the
and putting
exact
it
same
on
thing.
water doesn't make me be like, yes, give.
No,
I'm shelling out
obviously-
money. Where's my wallet? Take all my money. Like, no, it's not happening. I'm
Obviously,
sorry.
you'd have to do more than that. Like clearly, you couldn't just take Mad Max and put it on the water. Like that's a dumb thing to do. But like I think if you had a good story with good character, like anything can be good if you have
Yeah,
good
yes.
characters and good story and good like
I can agree with
a
that.
plot that you can follow.
I can agree with that, but I would be hard pressed to think to myself, I really want to see Waterworld rebooted. Like I'm already kind of sick of seeing like reboots and stuff. And
Oh,
like,
I wouldn't want to necessarily see it rebooted either.
But-
I'm just saying if you had an original story set at sea, it'd be a good vehicle to put that story in, right? So you're trying to go to you're pitching something and nobody wants to make anything if it doesn't already have an IP attached to it, right? That's just how it
You're saying
works.
that's the IP.
Yeah, you'd be like, oh, I
Okay.
have this cool water story about these family and blah blah blah, and then you would have something to attach it to now, right? And then you're like, okay, cool. It's like Pirates of the Caribbean. Is that really about the Pirates of the Caribbean ship like ride? No, they were just like,
Oh god,
I have
yeah,
a cool
no.
pirate story. I can attach it to this this ride, and that gives us like permission to make it because now there's like an IP and there's a there's a social consciousness of this thing.
Okay, here's a question. Was that good world building?
Which one?
The Pirates of the Caribbean.
The first film, yeah, first film was
Because-
fantastic about it.
Yeah.
The
The
lateral
subsequent ones I
films.
didn't think were that great.
Well, there's again, there wasn't really
Just didn't
anything.
care.
There wasn't anything that wasn't on screen. Like it was like hyper literal about his story. It's like okay, and we're gonna tell you everything, and like we're gonna have to give a plot to every single thing that we mentioned in the last one that was just world building. Like it was just world building.
Yeah.
Got a plot line. So like by the third movie, the Black Pearl, or fourth movie, I forget what it is. Like by the last pirate movie, I saw this theory, and it was hilarious to me because this is how like audiences think versus how like people actually making stuff think. And this is why canon's kind of bogus. But you have there's this theory, and it's like, I think it goes something like, when Officer Norringham or whatever his name is like, you are the worst pirate I've ever heard of, and he's like, oh, but you have heard of me, right? He's saying he's the worst pirate he's ever seen because he was in charge of trying to export slaves, and they were going to use the Black Pearl to export the slaves, and then Jack was put charge of the Pearl, and he worked for the East India Trading Company, and then Jack decided rather than let the Pearl be rather than delivering the slaves, he tells him in a later movie like people aren't cargo. He's like, you betrayed the East India Trading Company, and later on he's like,
Wait, this was in a movie?
yes, he goes, people aren't cargo, right? So then that means like, so that ties to that. And then in the third one with whatchamacallit again, the Davy Jones tells Jack, you owe me 83 souls or whatever, right? And then the 83 souls end up, the fans put it all together that like, oh, that's the slaves that were supposed to like die on the pirate ship. And then so they like read all this into it. Like, no, in the first movie, he says that just because he needed a fun quip where he's like,
Yeah.
you're the worst pirate I've ever heard of. And he's like, but you have heard of me. And then they're like, oh, but that line's so brilliant. I'm like, no, I guarantee you the writer of
yeah.
Pirates of the Caribbean, probably wasn't even written by the same person. I haven't looked. I haven't confirmed this. But then I guarantee you And if you did, dude, come and tell me I'm wrong. But I can almost guarantee you that he did not write that first script being like, and I have this backstory with Davy Jones, and then he's going to tie in to this thing. And then Jack's actually branded a pirate, not because he's just a pirate
Well,
that's been caught before, but he's branded as a pirate because he left the East India Trading Company by
like
stealing a bunch of slaves. That's how he became a
that's the
pirate.
thing is, I don't care. I don't need a backstory. He's an interesting character because I don't know the
Right,
backstory.
right. So like
I
a cool part was just like Aztec gold. Cool. Why is the Aztec gold cursed? Because it is. It just lets you have this bigger world. You're like, oh, cool. There's this like
yeah.
interesting curse going on, and what else could be? And then like the Black Pearl, and it's like, well, that's notorious, and like everyone knows about it. And you're like, well, why do they all know about it? Now you don't know why they know about it, and that's okay, right? It's just this ghost ship, you know. But then the next one is it's like that's Davy Jones, and he looks like this, and that's Will's dad. Like all you knew is Will's dad was a pirate, and like he betrayed that he refused to like go in on it.
Yeah, some
And
of that
like
stuff is just like,
but now the next one, it's like, no, Will's dad isn't just a pirate. He's like a special pirate that's trapped on Davy Jones's ship. And you're like, you went from giving me a lot to like play with and just imagine and think about to then like having to put it, each of those things, like try to wrap it up and tie it to something else.
It went from here's people in a circumstance who are put into a situation by circumstance. How do they react to it and get themselves out of it?
Right.
To these are all super important people and now they have always been important and blah blah blah. And you're like, but I don't.
It's one of my least
I can't relate.
favorite.
No one can relate to. No one actually relates to that.
Yes, it's one of
Because
my
no
least favorite tropes is you're actually the Messiah, like you're actually the son of Batman, and you're like, no, it was fine that Terry McGinnis was just a kid that stumbled into the Bat Cave, like that's fine. That Batman Beyond is just he's just a new kid who's also happened to lost his actual dad, and then it turns out he's a clone of Batman, and you're like, that was you did not need that. You don't need to do that. Yeah, and but it's like we're running out of places to go, so you start looking at your world building and being like, well, I guess we could set this up, and or not even world, but there's lack of planning. And the answer is like you should have just had an ending, and then we could have just ended the story. But everyone refuses to end any stories because that means that the money dries up, and so it's like, well, then you make a new story, and then that's your new IP that makes the new money.
Unless it's Waterworld.
Unless it's Waterworld.
I'm so right.
But
I can't believe people think that's a cult classic. Oh,
it is.
God.
Go watch it again.
I hate some of that
Or
stuff.
you don't like fun, so
I
don't think
love fun.
No,
I just have standards for fun.
if you don't like Mad Max Fury Road and you don't like iRobot and you don't like
don't even. First of all, I like iRobot. I just recognize it is the most mediocre movie ever, and it's okay. You know what? I actually just watched it the other night. That for some, I don't know why I enjoy it so much. I know it's not that great of a movie. It's mediocre.
Mm-hmm.
Tron Legacy.
It's because the soundtrack is so freaking
No,
good.
that's the thing. It's not just the soundtrack. Like I don't, because that's the thing. I'm not that big into Daft Punk, but I find that movie. It's one of those movies too where like I didn't get it the first time I watched it. I got it a bit more subsequently. But it's a fun movie. I just enjoy it. It's not great.
I wish it was better, and I don't know how to fix it exactly, like given the plot they have. But there should have been at least. There's a few problems with it. He never walked around the streets. That's like my biggest problem is he didn't world build, actually. Like within the Tron world, it feels so tiny because he's at the arena and there's supposedly people everywhere watching it, but they're all in shadow the whole time. And then he escapes the arena and he's at this like random, little cabin, like cyber cabin. And then you see her being like, they're bombing the city, they're attacking, killing them all. And you're like, why do I care about the people they're killing? Like they have like this artillery and it's shooting in and blowing up these people. And you're supposed to be like, and you hear like from far away. And you're like, I don't care about these people because I never met them. So you needed to meet like 2 or 3 people as he like escaped or when he first got there before they throw him straight into the arena, where you could have built up that world. Like one of my favorite parts of that film is when he gets to the like bar and there's that like weirdo character and other people and you're like, oh, that's interesting because you're giving me a little more of this world. It's like a cantina scene, but you only had one of those in the whole thing, and the only characters in this world, as far as I'm aware, are Jeff Bridges' doppelganger, who's just also Jeff Bridges. So far we have one character, and then his girlfriend, who's like, well, she's the only option, and then the people that he met like in fights and kills in the arena.
I will say too, the CGI does not hold. The face that they do on Jeff Bridges does not. Oh,
I'm curious to see how I feel about some of the other ones too that we've done that with, but it never looks as good as we think it does in retrospect. But That's a
Yeah.
whole other topic about realism and why I think it's completely overrated. Um, but and that's why like the uncanny valley is like the worst place to be. It's like don't be there. Don't be in the
Yeah.
uncanny valley.
No, I agree. Well, I think the reason with Tron Legacy why it doesn't work is partly you just kind of don't know why. Like, why is it exactly this way? Like I don't understand
Mm-hmm.
why you built a city like this. I don't understand why you're trying to get out. Like, what is going on
Yeah.
with it specifically? Like, they never really define that, the motivation
Mm-hmm.
for the doppelganger. So you don't really get to understand, like, okay, specifically why does he want to get out? Like, I just don't know why. It doesn't it not it's never really brought up. It's just brushed over because I don't think
Oh,
that they knew
the
why.
idea I think is he already took over the Tron world and he made it orderly, and then he was gonna break into the real world, bring his Tron warriors that we never got to
Yeah,
see again. Like I needed to see this. Like you see,
yeah,
I guess you see
it's
right before they leave, you see like the ships and and they're like sneaking around like on the train or whatever. You see like a bit of an army, but like I
yeah,
needed to see like the army doing like show the stormtroopers pushing around the citizens like in Tatooine. Show them messing with people's like life and being like, oh, this is sucky, they're authoritarian, and he likes the order of his ones and zeros or whatever, like his digital order, and he's like, I'm gonna go out to bring it to the real world now that I know it exists. um it's really weird that Jeff Bridges also like was like, oh, it was a lot of work, so I created another me, and you're like, you can just create other yous, and you can just like
yeah.
rewrite her
That
arm. Like,
again,
are you
none of
God
it
or are
made.
you not God? And it's like,
Yeah,
I
it's
kind of am, but not. And
yeah.
she's like
That's
the
what I mean. Like,
perfect invention,
yeah,
but
there's a
not.
lot.
And you're like, what is this?
Yeah. There's
She's
it's rough.
living
It's rough.
code. It's like
It's
there's a
rough.
few phrases that I hate, and like living code's one. And one of my most hated phrases is pure energy. I'm like, no, energy has to have a form. It's either kinetic or it's atomic or it's with a weak like it's electric. It's there's some form of it, but the
Yeah,
pure
that's
energy is like it's like saying it's pure math. Like no, math is
yeah.
like a
I don't.
category. Like it can't be pure a category. Pure math. There's no such thing as pure category. It's a pure mammal. You're like what? That's a category. There's no pure thing of that. It's like like
I think this is talking about endings and
yeah,
knowing when to finish. So I think this is going to be ours because
I know.
we're starting to get way off track.
Get into our pet peeves. All right, so that's the logo design. That's some world building for you,
I like it.
and that's the planet shot. So
All right. So then the question is, so what's next? We've
that's a good question. We got a lot of shots we
got
could
that
work
shot
on.
done. Would it be the environment next, or like the first pathway that we've talked about,
Yeah, that's
where the
probably
fire is going?
not a bad one. Let me go to the concept art.
Not a bad.
Yeah, we could do a few shots. I still need to clean up some stuff. Yeah, the path leading up to the lab is probably a good one. It's our second establishing shot. So we have like our super wide establishing shot and in the planet shot, and then we get a little closer. And then we pull back out. But we get that's probably a good one. We can do that. Go with our walkway shot.
Good.
For some
Okay.
reason, I thought I had proper concept art of it, but I don't. I just have sketches and like rough concept art. So,
That's all right.
yeah, but we'll look through that a little bit next week, um, and then build up to it. So,
Cool. I like it.
don't know how far I'll get in 1 week working on this, but I'll do my best and see where we end up.
Sounds good.
All right. Good talking,
Cool.
Rob. Thank you always for watching, and we'll see you next Friday. Peace.
Absolutely. Bye.
My mouse wasn't on end stream.